Welcome back, everybody. You're here at KGTR. We're celebrating the life of Ozzy Osbourne, his career as a rocker, a singer-songwriter, a sinner. Here, we're going to be capturing the article of To Hell and Back, as featured in Guitar Legends, issued May 30th of 2005, celebrating the life of Ozzy. And this is excerpts from the article of To Hell and Back. Now this video is going to cover the birth of Black Sabbath. All right, so join me on the screen. One of you out there asked me to go ahead and share with you this wonderful article. And that's what we do here. So if there's any articles or interviews of an artist or a guitar player from the magazine collections that I have that you want me to share with you, let me know and we can do a quick little video on the particular guitar player, artist, and musician. All right, let's go ahead and begin. This is the birth of Black Sabbath. In 1966, when Ozzy was 18, the Beatles were at their peak of fame, and no rock and roll band had a more profound influence on Ozzy. Swept away by Beatlemania, Ozzy Osbourne knew what he wanted to do with his life. The whole hysteria around Beatles just sucked me in. I felt like it was my way out. I wanted to be a Beatle. I used to fantasize about stuff like one of the Beatles marrying my sister. Beatlemania I wasn't around for Beatlemania, but that must have been electrifying. Armed with nothing more than his rather nasal singing voice and a small 50-watt Vox PA system purchased on a credit card by his father, Ozzy set out to form a band by placing an ad in a local music shop window. In those days, he recalls, if you had a PA system, you were accepted as a singer whether you could sing or not, because nobody could afford the equipment. First to respond to the ad was a local guitar player named Terrence Geezer Butler. He and Ozzy formed a band called Rare Breed that broke up after just 2 gigs. Soon afterward, 2 other local Birmingham musicians, Tony Iommi, Osbourne's old school bully, and drummer Bill Ward, saw Ozzy's advertisement. So Geezer Butler and Tony Iommi saw the advertisement of Ozzy Osbourne and headed over to his house at 14 Lodge Road. It's pretty amazing, actually, says Iommi. Bill and I were looking for a singer, and we spotted this advert that said, singer looking for a gig, call Ozzy at. I said to Bill, I know an Ozzy, it can't possibly be that one. So we went to the address listed in the ad and knocked on the door. Sure enough, Ozzy appeared. I said to Bill, forget it. But Bill wanted to chat with him. We talked, but when we left, I said, no way, Bill, I know him. 3 weeks later, we ended up together anyway. Life moves in mysterious ways. So Ozzy Osbourne now is in a band with his bully, the one that used to beat him up. He just hated him. Remember? He got beat up every day by Tony Iommi. So Tony Iommi was kicking Ozzy's ass. Can you picture little Ozzy Osbourne getting his ass kicked every single day by Tony Iommi? With Tony handling all guitar duties, Geezer switched to bass by removing 2 strings from his guitar. Ozzy named the group the Polka Toke Blues Band, and the foursome began learning blues covers and writing original material. The band quickly changed its name to Earth and hit the local blues clubs in search of gigs. Earth was a competent band, but no better than countless other English groups than trying to imitate traditional black American blues. It became clear to Osbourne, Iommi, and the rest of the local music fans were beginning to have enough of being force-fed mediocre blues and wanted something different. Earth's response was to turn up the volume to frightening decibel levels and start playing heavier, more distorted riff-based material. The result, when Earth took the stage at a local pub, audiences had no choice but to take notice. It used to drive us mad to think that we were up there working so hard, playing our guts out while all these guys were sitting around chattering. It's true. You can play the band and they're just ignoring you, says drummer Bill Ward. So we turned up the volume louder and louder until it was impossible for anyone to have a conversation. As their sound developed into a more bruising dirge, the band took on a new, more frightful persona that would further distance themselves from the local blues competition. Lyricist Geezer Butler suddenly turned his attention toward darker subjects like nuclear war and the supernatural, while Iommi and his trusty Gibson SG produced one chilling detuned mudslide after another. It quickly became obvious to the band that a name change was in order. As they headed into rehearsal one day, they noticed that the movie across the street was showing the 1935 Boris Karloff horror classic Black Sabbath. I love that film. I love Boris Karloff. And Boris Karloff loves me. I asked myself, remembers Ozzy, why is there a line of people with money in their hands paying to get the shit scared out of them? It's because people get a thrill out of being around evil. True. Think of Halloween. While it was true that the band had struggled up to this point as Earth, in part due to its lack of direction, it was equally clear that changing its name to Black Sabbath amounted to a very shrewd decision. Though most of England's record companies evinced no interest in releasing Sabbath's first album, recorded toward the end of '69, in 8 hours for a mere $1,500 American dollars. So they recorded that album in 8 hours. The Vertigo label had the foresight to release it in February of 1970. So they were in the studio for 8 hours, cost them $1,500 at that time in 1969. But the Vertigo record labels decided to release it in 1970. And was soon reaping the benefits as rock bands throughout the world embraced Sabbath as the perfect antidote to 60s flower power. Remember, the Beatles already broke up in 1970, so you had a lot of bands now vying for Top Gun, because the Beatles were number one from like 1963 to 1970. They're gone, so now you have all these bands like The Doors, the Beach Boys went through a transformation. I think you had Jimi Hendrix out there, Janis Joplin, Cream, Yardbirds or the Birds. There are all these bands out there now vying for top spot. But Ozzy and Sabbath were getting a little bit heavier than anybody else. All right, the whole hippie thing was still happening around that time, says Ozzy, and for us, that was bullshit. We lived in a dreary, polluted, dismal town in Birmingham, and we were angry about it, and that was reflected in our music. No doubt, due to the music's demonic nature and unforgiving heaviness, radio wanted no part of Sabbath, and the critics lambasted them at every turn. Yet their debut album sold well, eventually reaching number 8 on the UK chart and number 23 in America. For the first time in his life, Ozzy was a success, and money started coming in, if at first slowly. With its first royalty check, he gave his mother £50, then took the rest and bought a pair of shoes and a bottle of cheap cologne. Isn't that sad? Remember, to this day, up until then, he only had, remember, one pair of shoes, one pair of socks, one pair of trousers, no underwear. Poor guy probably never took a shower. Can you imagine how dirty he was? Or the bed? And then they're all, 6 people sleeping on the same bed? Can you imagine that? Oh, poor Ozzy. And so then he bought a bottle of cheap cologne, because remember, he couldn't take a shower. Probably had no running water. Remember, they had no bathroom in their house. They had to go to like an outhouse or something like that, because I hated the way I smelled. So that was the beginning and the formation of Black Sabbath. What are your thoughts on how they formed Black Sabbath? From Purebred, or whatever that first band was called, I already forgot the damn name, to Earth. And then, isn't that weird? They're rehearsing and they're looking across the street. And then there's a 1935 Boris Karloff film called Black Sabbath. And at that time, Tony Iommi was already probably using the flatted F in his guitar riffs, getting heavier, they're turning up the volume, it's more distorted and so forth. And then they're writing more darker material, but louder and louder, more distorted and heavier. Check out that first album, released in, I believe, according to them, February of 1970. Recorded in 1969, just 8 hours for a mere $1,500 American dollars. That was a good album. Obviously, it could have been better, but it was the beginning of what they would call heavy rock and roll. You know, you had Beatles rock and roll, right? But this is probably like the very, very beginning of heavy metal back in 1970. Back then, it was probably like hard rock. There's rock and roll, then there's hard rock. Black Sabbath was now hard rock. All right, that was the excerpt from To Hell and Back on the birth of Black Sabbath. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, leave them below. I'm Tony. This is from Guitar Legends Magazine, issue May 30th, 2005. celebrating the year Ozzy Osbourne and his career 20 years before his passing. All right, our next story is going to be on the fall of Black Sabbath. So here we are, from his poor upbringing, getting bullied by Tony Iommi in school, having no clothes, no money, then going to prison, stealing TVs. Right, he stole a television set, went to prison at 17, tattooed Ozzy Osbourne on his knuckles. 1966 came along. Beatlemania was in full swing. He loved the Beatles. And he bought a PA system, a PA box, PA system that he put on his dad's credit card, or his dad bought it for him. And I guess according to him, if you got a PA system, people are going to follow you because no one else can afford the equipment. So you go where the equipment is. If you have a Marshall or an amp, go where that is because you're going to be successful. All right. So our next story is going to be on the fall of Black Sabbath. So they're starting to see success, right? Their first album's released. He's starting to get some money, royalties, whatever. Gives his mom 50 pounds, buys some cheap cologne, and he stinks. So we're going to now cover the rise of Black Sabbath and then the fall of Black Sabbath, where he's going to get the boot from his fellow bandmates. But we want to know why and how he gets the boot. All right? Any questions, comments, or feedback, leave them below. Again, right now we're going to be celebrating the life of Ozzy Osbourne. There's countless of videos out there in the past 2 weeks since his passing. If you've seen them, I recommend them. They're all great. This is my take because I'm the only one giving you this account from the wonderful article of To Hell and Back from this issue that most people have never heard of, remember, or seen, but there's some great content here on Ozzy Osbourne, J.Q. Lee, Randy Rhoads, Regulus, Zakk Wylde, and we're going to cover that because I have all the material here to share with all of you. All right, so stay tuned. Our next video will be the fall of Black Sabbath. And behind the scenes, look for regular video uploads of all my George Lynch content. So any any concert shows, clinics of George Lynch, Lynch Mob, Dawkins. If you love George Lynch, he's the last of the big three: Randy, Eddie, and George. After that, that's it. That's it. There's other guitar players after the big three. Just like the big three in tennis, you have Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer. There's the big three in guitar. And that was Randy Rhoads, Eddie Van Halen, and George Lynch. Before those big three, you had Clapton, Page, Hendrix, and Beck. According to George Lynch, those are the big four. Because they came out all at once. Page, Clapton, Beck, and Hendrix. So imagine being a kid when those four guitar players came out. But when 80s was rolling around, the late 70s, all you had was Rhoads, Van Halen, and George Lynch. And then, several years later, you had the J.Q. Lees, the Warren DeMartinis, the Steve Vais, and everybody. But those were all 80s guitar players. I'm talking about the mid-late 70s. There's only three. You can possibly include Carlos Cavazos, but he was a nobody at the time. So, if you love George Lynch, click subscribe, hit the notification bell for endless George Lynch stuff. But right now we're focusing on the life of Ozzy Osbourne. Thanks everybody. Stay tuned for the fall of Black Sabbath. Alright? See ya.